Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Sheffer.
It's always amazing to me that any time the topic of history of Arizona comes up, the first thing that people want to talk about is Jacob Waltz and the lost Dutchman gold. Well, I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of history that took place long before Jacob Waltz ever got to Arizona. In fact, even when we were kids in school, we remembered we were taught about 1492. You remember that? They used to say, well, the first thing that happened was a fellow named Chris who sailed to Bounding, Maine, hunting for treasure and trinkets and stuff to send back to that lady in Spain. But when the three little ships came rolling in and landed with a thud, well, if the Indians had known then what they know now, they'd have nipped that in the bud. Well, they didn't, as we all know. And what that did was allow all sorts of people to come visiting our ground over here, looking for gold and treasure. And Spain was one of the worst of them. And the most famous one that they sent over was a fellow by the name of Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. And he came over here because he was of the firm belief that there were cities over here made of gold. The 7 cities of Cibola, or Cibola, depending on whose expert opinion you want to go by. He came over here hunting them up. Well, to his disappointment, come to find out, they were all made out of mud. They weren't made out of gold. But now for you folks who really would like to know about those 7 cities, because there really were 7 cities, they just were all made out of mud. They didn't have any gold. Here are the 7 cities, and you can go look them up if you want to. They were Hawica, Halona, Matsaki, that sounds Spanish, Quivira, Quiaquima, and Coaquina. And of course, there was Cibola. Well, unfortunately, Francisco didn't do real well with that down here. But he did the best he could. Well, come 400 plus years later, we have a fellow by the name of Frank Dobie. And Frank found his gold mine in the fact that he could write a book about all the gold mines that nobody had anymore and lost treasures, the least of which was Jacob Waltz and his lost Dutchman gold. He found enough of those stories to fill a book with 350 some pages of all these different stories about treasure found and lost. What he did was he called those searchers Coronado's children, and that's where that got started. He wrote that book about 1930. Well, we have to say that Jacob Waltz did play a very integral part in the history of the Southwest and in Arizona. In fact, we had people coming over here all the time looking for the gold. We had people that they caught what we called gold fever. And it's very real, folks. It's a very real thing to have this gold fever. Made people crazy. Made them crazy enough that there were so many of them, they called them Crazy Jakes after Jacob Waltz. And we had Jacob Robert Jacob, I should say. He was Crazy Jake. But we had other people like Bob Ward and Chuck Crawford and some other folks. I won't say they'd shoot you, but I would never say that they wouldn't shoot you either. Be that as it may. They were Crazy Jakes. What that meant was, if you were to go up in a mountain and you found gold somewhere, after they'd been up there all these years, they'd just as soon shoot you as talk to you because you were going to find something that quick that they'd been hunting for all those years. What I have to tell you, what's true is that from the passing of Jacob Waltz to about the 1950s, 60s, there were over 100 people killed in this mountain. Part of the problem was not necessarily the Crazy Jakes, but people didn't take the mountain seriously. The Indians said it was the home of the powerful thunder god, who was the protector of all the sacred ground and the gold and everything else that was down in this mountain. And maybe he was the one that caused people to die. But there were over 100 people that did. And they continued to die. Well, we don't have the number of people out here looking for gold like we used to. But just less than a decade ago, we had a fella come over here by the name of Kenny Clark. And Kenny was a fella about 56 years old. He came over. Apparently, he was a pretty good hiker. But like so many others, he went to the ranger station, told him where he was going to go and supposedly how long he was going to be gone. And of course, all the rangers will tell you, no matter who you are, take water. Make sure you've told people where you're going, how long you're going to be gone, but take water. In fact, one of the supervisors, a woman by the name of Jennifer Johnson, had a wonderful line that she used with hikers. She said, when you get up in the mountain, when you only have half your water left, half of your hike is already done. So turn around and come home, or do the best you can if you haven't gotten lost or something stupid. But at any rate, he decided he was going out there, and what he told people was he was just going to go as far as he could go. Well, he did, and they found him 5 days later. He had died of heat stroke and dehydration, no water left. And he was out there in Garden Valley someplace. He's roughly 2 miles off of the first water trailhead. And he was a very dead fella. What made this really stupid was that 2 years before that, there was another episode that had taken place where a fella by the name of Curtis Merworth had come over from Utah. He was from Salt Lake City, and this guy thoroughly believed that he knew where the gold was of Jacob Waltz. He was just going to come over here, go in the mountain, pick it up, and go home. No matter that nobody else had found it for 100 years, but he knew right where it was. Well, he came over, he went and he parked up at First Water Trailhead, and he went into the mountain, and it took him 2 days, and fortunately this time he had taken his cell phone with him. He ran out of water, but he had his cell phone, and he called, and they came and got him. Put him in the hospital for a couple days and to try and curb him having a heat stroke, but he was dehydrated, but they got him back to health, and they sent him home. Well, come the following year, not having learned anything apparently, he comes back in July again, and he goes, buys himself a map just to make sure he knows right where the lost treasure is of Jacob Waltz. And he brings 2 friends with him. He brings Malcolm Meeks and a fellow by the name of Adrian Charles. Now, all of these people are over 50. Malcolm was over 60. Curtis was the youngest of the bunch. He was only 49. 2 of these guys weren't in very good health, but they're all coming over here and they're going to go into the mountain in July. So they come over, and once again, they park at First Water. But alas, they had umbrellas. They took umbrellas with them into the mountain to shade their heads from the hard sun. Of course, they didn't take enough water, but they had umbrellas. I'm glad they had those umbrellas. Well, they went in, and after a couple days, you see, now they were just going to be there a couple days to get this gold. And with 3 of them, it'd have been faster, so they could carry more gold faster, and they'd get the trip done. Well, nobody heard from them. And nobody heard from them, and it got past July. And now the people back home in Salt Lake City are calling. They're wanting to know where Curtis is. Well, nobody knows. So they sent out a search party. And they searched, and they searched, and they searched. They couldn't find anybody. They finally gave up the hunt in December. That's how long it had taken. And bear in mind that there were times in these valleys, inside the mountain, in these canyons and valleys, the temperatures would get to 130, 140 degrees. Well, they didn't find them. Finally, come January 5th, a fellow by the name of Rick Gwynn was up there rooting around on Black Mesa at the Yellow Peak area, and he found 2 bodies up there. Now, according to Rick, he said that the one body, the head had been shot twice. There were 2 bullet holes in the skull, and the other body had been shot through and through. But there they were, dead on black basalt rock up on Black Mesa. That's kind of like sitting yourself down in a frying pan during the summer up there. That's got to be awful. But they had them umbrellas now. They didn't have any water, but they're dead. So anyway, they still haven't found Curtis. It wasn't but 10 days later, they found Curtis Merriworth over on Yellow Peak, and he was dead. He was real dead. Unfortunately for these 3, Coronado's children, they never found anything. Leastwise, they didn't have anything with them when they found these bodies. And if in fact they had discovered anything that might have told them where the gold was, we're never really going to know for sure, because they took that with them to the grave. Now, just like so many other people, they have been added to the tally sheet of the Superstition Mountains of dead people. More or less really shouldn't have had to pay the price, but they did. The Golden Ghost just eluded them the same as it did everybody else. Why they do it, why people go up there, is it just for gold? I don't know. I think it's just another one of those mysteries of the Superstition Mountain. Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.